Hi, my name is Glory. I'm a third year student studying at the Bartlett School of Architecture in London, originally from Hong Kong.
And I'm Yan Shan. I'm a third year architecture student studying at the Bartlett as well, and I'm originally from Malaysia.
You're listening to Designing Thoughts with the Archigals, a podcast where we talk about working and creativity, living well, the human condition with relationships, and life experiences.
Before we get into the podcast, I would just like to ask for a small favor. It would mean a lot to us if you could leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or leave a comment on our YouTube channel just to let us know how you feel about the podcast and other topics you'd be interested in hearing in. Hi everyone, welcome back to our podcast. I'm your host Glory and this is your co-host Yan Shan. And today we're going to be talking about aesthetics in architecture and kind of like form, functionality, and all that jazz. So hopefully this will be interesting to you. So as usual, we can kick off with our weekly update. So Yanshan, how has your week been? The week after reading week.
It's been a good week.
Really?
What did I do?
We went to Kew Gardens on Tuesday for a history field trip. So that was really nice. Did you like it?
Yeah. I did like it. It's actually really nice. This house was just like really warm inside, which is really nice because it's like the tropical house. And then it's nice to get out of London sometimes, and it's actually a really nice area as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say that it's a good kind of escape from studio. Even though I know during the trip, like I kept bothering you, and I was like, Yanshan, I'm so stressed. Like I don't have time to do my work. You're like, just enjoy the trip, please. Yeah.
And then I went to my site, which is very far, and then I got some work done, which was good. I had a good tutorial.
So pretty normal, typical week for you. Okay. I feel like at the beginning my week wasn't that great. Like personal stuff, dealing with some personal stuff. So I think up till Thursday I was still feeling pretty crap, but then on Friday I had a good tutorial as well. It was actually really nice. I remember keep telling you that I was so surprised that my tutorial went well, and you're like, Glory, can you please just like accept the fact that you're actually doing well? So yeah, that was really nice. Had a good tutorial, and then I put my drawing on the wall, and then I think we just had good discussions with like some of my unit mates and friends, and then I had dinner with my friends at a vegan restaurant, and then that was really nice to just talk about stuff. And then yesterday also, because it's almost submission, dude, I can't believe it's almost end of term 1. Like, can you believe it? Oh my god, like 2 more weeks until submission, you know. And so this week it's Dan, my tutor, says like it's time to like go hard on it, and I feel like I like on Wednesday I already made time to go out with like my sister, so I feel like I don't have enough time, but I'm gonna try my best because yesterday I already spent majority of my time in the studio, and then today I'm just gonna like because my friend has a birthday thing, so you know.
But it's like because this submission would be like 10% of our final grade, so it's actually quite a big thing.
Really? How do you know it's 10%?
Because it's 15 credits out of 120. Okay, I don't know how the maths works. A bit more than 10%.
Okay, well, thank you for making me suddenly realize how.
Okay, but this is like that's the indicative mark. You can always make it better, although none of us will actually put in the effort to do that.
Yeah, but no, I still kind of I really enjoyed the process so far. Yeah, how are you feeling for your P1 so far?
It's good. I think for the amount of effort that I put in, it's going pretty well.
Okay.
I don't put in like tons and tons of effort.
No, I think you put in a lot. You like shouldn't dumb yourself down. I feel like you do. Like for the amount of, because I always feel like you're a work hard, play hard type of person, and I feel like for your personality, I feel like you put in a lot of effort, at least from my point of view.
Thank you. Although I definitely don't work like 8 hours a day like you, but yeah.
Well, I still feel like you managed to do a lot in like a shorter period of time. Like I need to spread it out, you know.
Thank you. So nice.
You're welcome. Let me see what else happened this week.
I played touch rugby, which was actually pretty fun.
Oh yeah, you told me. It was so nice because I feel like when you tell me you're doing sports, and then I'm like, oh yeah, you get all the adrenaline and like release all your endorphins, and then you seem so happy. I remember you telling me that you were so happy, like
I was just so happy. I think because of the endorphins, I was just like running so much, and then I was sore from like the day after until today. I'm still sore from all that running. I
But
just
it's like a good
need to
sore.
exercise.
Like I feel like when you're
Yeah,
sore, you're happy that you're sore, you
yeah,
know? So
yeah,
yeah,
I am.
really.
I think
Yeah.
that's, yeah. But I think I should like just get more fit, you know. I don't understand why I'm so sore. It wasn't so much running.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm happy that you're doing touch because it's really fun. I
Yeah,
did it before. But
and
I'm
you did
not doing it.
badminton,
Yeah, but
which
I'm
is
doing
like,
badminton. If I didn't do badminton, I would actually do touch with you, you know, because it's both Wednesday evening. But
yeah.
anyways, all right. So that was our week. And then we can move on to the bulk of the topic, which is aesthetics. So I guess we can start off with what aesthetics is.
I guess it's different from like what it is in like Tumblr and Pinterest compared to what it is in philosophy and stuff.
What is it in philosophy?
So in it's like the study of beauty and like how things look. Whereas like when you say something is aesthetic, it's like, oh, it looks nice.
Oh, okay. So actually, aesthetics is like an actual course, like a field of study
Yeah, so
in
it's like
philosophy.
in philosophy, it's like a set of principles underlying the work of an artistic movement, the nature of beauty or taste. It's like
Oh.
concerned with appreciating beauty.
So there's actually like a set of principles, is there?
Yeah, like I guess the thing with aesthetics is that like people say that it's concerned with taste instead of uh like so that it's something which you decide on an individual basis, but then you always want to have rules to determine whether something's aesthetic or not. So it
Yeah, because I was saying if
yeah.
it's like a field of study, surely they might have like a set of rules or like kind of like these guidelines, like how do you define what's
Mm,
beautiful and what's
mm,
not. I know that the thing that comes off of the top of my head is like symmetry would
mm,
be like one of the rules I would say, but I think all of it, I don't know, I think a lot of it is down to like individual preference. So
mm.
I mean, we don't have to delve into that much of it, but yeah, on the surface level, like you said, it would be like kind of Pinterest, Tumblr, that type of aesthetics, you know.
Yeah. So like
Yeah.
if you look for like aesthetic, you know that YouTube videos called how to be aesthetic, and then there's things like doing your morning routine, decorating your room, making your Instagram like, you know how it used to be trendy to make your Instagram like one
Color.
aesthetic, like a color base.
Yeah, like having a color theme.
Yeah, and I used to want to do that too, but then I was just too lazy. But like I think that's part of it, and also like using Visco and then starting like a Tumblr blog. Were you in the age where like people used to make Tumblr blogs?
I've
That was
never
like
had
kind of
Tumblr.
cool.
I never had Tumblr, and I don't know what Visco is.
Oh, okay. Visco is like the photo editing app, which is like
Oh,
super
okay.
aesthetic. Anyway, and then you like yeah, so basically like when you just follow a color palette, so using mood
Yeah.
boards.
Okay, I feel like the whole how to be aesthetics type esque of YouTube videos is like taking it too far, you know? Like I feel like okay, your life could look aesthetic, but that's only for the gram. No, like you can't have I have such an aesthetic life. I don't think that
Really?
makes
I feel like sometimes it makes me happy to have an aesthetic, like that kind of aesthetic life. As in, like, sometimes I'm like, wow, I'm like going to the gym. Okay, I'm not sure that counts as being aesthetic, but then like I'm like making breakfast, eating it, and
that
then I
I
have
feel
cool
like
pictures on my wall.
that's being productive.
That's true.
And then
That's
the
slightly
living
different.
space, I feel like the living space is the backdrop for the aesthetics, so the aesthetics actually applies to the interior of your room, that makes the whole thing aesthetic, because you could be performing the same activities,
Mm.
but then it wouldn't be aesthetic because the backdrop is not quote unquote aesthetics.
Yeah.
That kind of leads into the second point of like architecture, because it's the backdrop, right, of like providing the aesthetics, kind
But I
of.
think also being aesthetic sometimes means like making sure your outfits match and have like a vibe. So it can be also like clothing.
Yeah, exactly, but
But
I
also
guess
but also you're right, it's like the backdrop is in like it's not really the actions that you do. It's more like how something looks, how your room looks and you look.
yeah, exactly. It's the kind of the surface visuals of it, and then the activity performed like kind of complements. So then the activity links to the aesthetic, and then I feel like the activity like without the aesthetics should only be called productive. You know what I mean? I
Okay.
feel like that's how it is.
Okay, this is a branch of philosophy, but okay.
Okay, anyways, let's move on from this tangent and like move on to like kind of the architecture part, I guess kind of art like functionality versus aesthetics, that kind
Yeah.
of thing.
I feel
Yeah.
like because of our school at the Butler, it's like you have to be aesthetic. Like the images that you produce and the projects that you produce have to have a coherent aesthetic, which means that the pictures look as if they come from the same designer, and also they have to be like aesthetically pleasing.
Came from the same designer, you mean from you or
Yeah,
Bartlett
from
as
like
a
us,
school?
from us. As in like I feel like all the images that we produce have to look as if they're made by the same person. You can't just like you can't like mesh aesthetics.
What do you mean by the same person? You mean like you as a designer or as a collective from the school
No, me as
itself?
a designer.
So you have to have your own distinct style, you
Yeah,
mean?
that's what I mean.
Oh. I
Don't you
don't
think?
I don't feel that. I don't know. I feel like I don't feel that way, but I guess if you look back at my work, maybe I do have like a certain language. I don't know if you feel that way,
Mm.
but
I feel like we are forced to have a language actually. Like I actually feel like if I decided to one
okay.
day draw like a UG one style like technical drawing, but then with like I don't know, and then put that with like a high tech animation render that I'll probably end up doing, then it's just wouldn't jive.
I mean, to be fair, I feel like like because your whole project has a kind of storyline that goes with it, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
if you suddenly shift, like if it's not supported by the storyline and you randomly make changes in kind of like your language or say your style, then I feel like the story wouldn't flow. Like it doesn't support it. Like why are you making the sudden jump?
Mm.
You know, I kind of see it that way because otherwise if your portfolio kind of have all these different styles, then it just looks like you're kind of unsure of what you're doing and you're just
Mm.
jumping around. um, and I think when you finally find a language or a style that kind of complements what you're trying to say through your project, then that kind of language develops throughout. Like that makes more sense to me. I feel like even for me, like when I look back at my year two work and like this year, there's kind of similarities, but
Mm-hmm.
which you could say like that's my style, but then I feel like it developed organically for me at least. I don't know how you feel about it.
Yeah, I think it's organic. But it's also something that's expected.
Well, yeah, but I guess you can say because like so many students have went through the same path as us. So obviously you can say it's expected, but then for me or for us, I didn't I obviously at the beginning of the path, I didn't know how it was going to turn out. So for me it's always been a process of seeing like how does my language develop? Like
Mm.
how do I
I think
develop
my
my
tutors want it to happen because if I make something which is of a different, even like HDR map, which is like the background, then they're like, oh, I think you should, go back to the other one because you want it to look like, especially for the final suite of images, which is like the end of the project when you're trying to present it and stuff. They're like, just use the same filter, use the same mist function and things. I think because maybe mine is like very controlled in the render environment.
Okay. I mean, obviously yours is like very digital, so I wouldn't have much knowledge in it. So for context, like um I'm a very analog person, so my projects are all very analog. Like I do a lot of hand drawings and stuff, whereas Yen Shan's projects is very digital. Like she uses a lot of different softwares. Like you used Rhino last year and this year using like Maya or
Mm,
something.
yeah, Max.
So
And also like with a lot of like post editing in Photoshop, which you do too, to be fair.
yeah, Photoshop is like for everyone, but you do like 3D rendering and stuff, which
Hmm.
I have no idea how to do. But yeah, I I don't know. Like I didn't know what the HDMI map is. I'm
Yeah.
clearly saying it wrong, but I kind of get it. Like the final suite of images like have to look a certain way. I think, but that's also based off of like what you've done throughout the year.
Mm,
Like if
yeah.
you kind of produce, I feel like because in the beginning it's all blank canvas, you can kind of go in any direction you want, and
Hmm.
then I feel like once the students have like a kind of thought of which directions and what language they want to adapt and use, then that kind of forms the main basis of like where their language or style is gonna go towards, and
Hmm.
then the tutor accordingly reacts to what you've produced and then like
Hmm.
tells you kind of the direction of like what you should do next and not like jump too far away from it, otherwise the project kind of like derails and stuff. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. Definitely it follows on from what you've been doing in the past. But I guess the point was that our
Okay.
school really focuses on aesthetics compared to functionality, because a lot of other schools look at um like, I think someone was telling me that like Bath and stuff, you have to do projects with engineers,
Yeah.
so they really have to follow like whether it's able to be built and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I actually spoke to some students from Bath when I was applying, and it is very technical. Like, I think one of my seniors from my high school showed me one of her portfolios, and it was like a lot of calculations and a lot of physics and maths, which is like for them. I think that's their approach. It's all good. Like that's what they're good at. Um,
Mm.
but which I almost wanted to apply, because I wanted to do maths and science. Actually, the other day, like for one of my videos, like there was someone who commented like, "How much maths and physics do you use?" And I was like,
None.
"Okay, how do I form this question? How do I form my answer?" You know, I don't feel like it's none, because I feel like there is consideration. Like, okay, to be fair, like first year was the most physics and maths you've ever used in this course, obviously,
Mhm.
for one of the modules, like
Mhm.
structures. And then I feel like for the other, like year 2 and 3, there's like no maths. I feel like it's mostly like basic physics, say for like the tech
Mhm.
report. You have to consider that at least. I feel like you do a lot of research for like the site and stuff, but it's not really like applying like complex physics or maths kind of
Mhm.
knowledge to it. But I do think there's some sort of, I guess, basic physics to it. But yeah, like you said, there is a lot of emphasis on the aesthetics and the visuals and how it's perceived when you showcase it to other people.
Yeah.
Um, but I feel like that's kind of like Bartlett's trademark. Like when we talked about this to Dan in the previous episode as well. Like it's kind of like known for their stunning like visuals to capture the viewer's attention, and I
Mhm.
feel like for them that's what they're good at, and that's their kind of selling point as a
Mhm.
school. And I feel like in the end, I feel like for that visual to be super stunning, the kind of end goal is to kind of sell the idea to the viewer the most.
Mhm.
And the first step is to capture their attention through the visuals, and then you can
Yeah.
kind of like get through them through the visuals and then explain the project through that, you know.
Yeah. I think that makes sense, because also, even though we don't really use a lot of maths and physics, we still use quite a lot of, we still have to consider like the budget. Okay, not really budget. We have to consider like the site constraints and the project requirements,
Yeah.
and we still have to have like a produce a technical report which looks at whether it's able to be built or not. So not really whether it's cheap to be built, but whether, like, how far you can push uh materials so that what you're building is still feasible. And I think that's really important and kind of is enough. Like it really speaks to the speaks like you end up having a conversation between like design and the technical side, and it's like really interesting to have that conversation instead of the conversation being about, oh, where can I get the materials, and how can I bring it to site, and how much would it cost and stuff like that.
Yeah. But even so, I feel like it's nice that those questions are there to like kind of keep you grounded. Like
Mhm.
despite the fact that I didn't really enjoy doing my tech report in second year,
Mhm.
I still feel like it was kind of asking the important questions. It's not just like completely speculative, you know? Like I feel like
Mhm.
Bartlett students like obviously are crazily talented and creative, and you see a lot of these speculative projects that seem really insane, but like behind each of these projects is actually like a super detailed tech report. And
Mhm.
I feel like Bartlett doesn't really advocate that part of it, so nobody really gets to see that side of the project.
Mhm.
But there is a lot of like detailed like tech stuff that goes behind it. Like even for us, our third year with our projects, we still have to do a tech report, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I still remember them asking like the cost of the like what's the cost of the project, and then I had to like go and research like different buildings and like their costs like at a similar size to mine, and like try and speculate like the cost of that
Mhm.
building. But yeah, did you enjoy the tech part, like
Yeah, I
accompanying?
really did.
That's good.
Actually, I'm not sure I did. But I think it was good. It was a good exercise.
Yeah,
I'm
I
not
agree. It
sure.
was a good
Yeah, I'm not sure I
exercise.
enjoyed it. But then again, I'm not sure I enjoy much of my course. Most of it's just a good exercise. But then again, like you know how people there's a whole argument about whether which one is more important in architecture. And I feel like for me at least, some of my favorite buildings are ones which are really not economical and not well built, but they're just so nice to look at. Like to me, how it looks is just so important. Like for example, like a lot of Zaha Hadid's buildings, even though they don't really work properly. Like I remember, like I don't really know Dongdaemun Plaza. That was like the building which I think I went there when I was like 13, 14, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna design after this because it's just so nice. There was like the wind, and then there's like people, and then there's like music, and then it's like so big, and I was like, oh, it's so nice.
Yeah, actually went to Dongdaemun Plaza like right before I went to uni, like like maybe like 1 or 2 years before applying to architecture. And like I think as a noob who knows nothing about architecture, I was like, "Oh, this is so cool." And then I actually felt like I was like, "Oh, the fluidity between the exterior and the interior is just so cool." Until like you go into architecture school and realizes that everyone kind of like just
Shits
makes
on it.
fun of it,
Yeah.
which I get it, but then at the same time I feel like for people who don't really know architecture at all, that's kind of like very cool and like fluid and like a great experience for them to like enjoy the space. You know what I mean?
Mm. So it's always balancing like experiential versus whether it actually serves its purpose, which is why I guess a lot of these buildings end up being like museums and because then they don't really have like a set
Function.
like such a like very tight constraints to how it should function compared to like even an office block.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean this kind of follows the whole question of like form versus function, right? Like should form follow function or like should function follow form, that kind of thing. So this is like a I guess a principle of design or like a saying that's like brought up a lot in architecture. I always hear it in first year. I don't know if you heard it a lot. They were like, "Oh, form follows function," or like function follows form. Basically, it's a principle of design associated with like late 19th and early 20th century, like architectural industrial design in general, that
Mhm.
states that the shape of a building or an object should primarily relate to its intended function or purpose.
Mhm.
So, like this phrase, form follows function, kind of became like a battle cry of modernist architects after the 1930s. And basically, they're kind of like it's kind of to imply that like decorative elements, like ornaments, were superfluous in like modern buildings, and it's not really like necessary, you know.
Mhm.
So yeah, and then I thought it was just like an interesting read like back then to look at kind of like it's almost I remember reading this book called The Architecture of Happiness. I think it's by Alain de Botton.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they were talking about kind of like the battle between like engineers and like architects and how like engineers wanted to be utilitarian and then
Yeah.
architects wanted to like add ornaments to it.
Yeah.
I feel like it's kind of obviously like finding a balance between the two because I don't know. I know some people who really like utilitarian buildings and like not very ornamental, but obviously like I feel like super decorative ornaments like from like I say 19th century is kind of like outdated now. It's not really that ornamental anymore.
Right.
I feel like now it's more about like what's the word? Like parametrics design.
Architect. Oh, right.
Yeah, or like those kind of things. So,
But I
yeah.
think there's something that relates the two. And also I think even in ornamentation that was a really even until now when it does but for example like when I went to Spain that week and then I saw like some Gaudi buildings and it was just like so nice to look at the ornamentation on it and like the
Mm.
details and the fact that it's like
Yeah.
so useless just makes it even more cool that like that it's able to be put on. Like why would anyone do that? Like why would you make a railing so like hard to make? Like it's just like you could have just done it so much easier. But I guess it's like yeah. But then but then I feel like now, yeah, there's less of that, but also because it's maybe considered old fashioned, like it's out of taste.
Yeah, but I definitely understand what you're saying. Like, or ornaments like did their thing, you know, like they're there for that specific reason to be like looked at and appreciated, which means it's done its thing, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I can also appreciate like ornaments for what they are, But obviously, if like every building is like that, that's not gonna work. But I feel like it's nowadays, even like within our projects that exist, I think I kind of looked at like ornaments like this, like for my P1 kind of
Mm.
Louis Sullivan. But I feel like it's definitely finding the balance between the two. I guess, but obviously, like our opinions doesn't make any like doesn't carry any weight because we're not actually like architects or anything. We're
Mm.
just like undergrad students,
Mm-hmm.
and everything we do only exists in our heads and in our projects on paper or like in a PDF document, you know. So we can kind of say whatever we want, but I think it's just kind of finding a balance between the two, and like even though you have the kind of speculative part, the design that kind of, I guess that would kind of be kind of the ornament side of things or like the aesthetic part, but it's still grounded with like the context and the site and like you say the functionality of like what that building is doing.
Yeah. And I think even though we say that our course in this school doesn't emphasize the technical aspect so much, some units in particular still look at, for example, my unit, I think, has an emphasis on material testing, even though this kind of ends up in everyone having a similar, like, machine-ish aesthetic. But because we are forced to test and iterate, that's also a way of replicating what really goes on in the industry, I think. Actually, I don't know.
Yeah, we can't say anything, but I think it's just our experiences like
Yeah,
in the unit and the project.
yeah. And also, I think if you go too far with the, for example, even your unit, I guess would be considered the most like imaginary-ish. You still have to produce a tech report for it, and you still have to make it work at least on paper. And I guess even when you design it, it doesn't just float around like things like they have stands and then they have like armatures and they land on the
Yeah,
ground and stuff.
because I feel like ultimately that's the difference between like art and architecture. Like
Mm,
you need to have you will have restraints, like let's not say budget, but also like sites
mm-hmm.
and the context of like what you're building, and then the kind of like the reason of why you're building. Those are all
Yeah,
like things that grounds it. Is that's why it's not just like floating around, you
yeah. I
know?
think also leading on from like the reason why you build it, even if you add ornamentation or even if you choose to use Zaha Hadid style like parametric design, it still has to be led by your narrative. So
Mm.
in a way, it's not superfluous because and also you even if you wanted to put it in just for the sake of making it look nice, your tutor probably wouldn't agree to that because it doesn't suit your narrative.
Yeah, I think all of it is just a process of like picking out what should go in there,
Hmm.
and also like you said, the kind of language and style that you follow throughout the project. Like you said, like it all comes down together like following the narrative of the project anyway. So yeah,
Yeah,
I think it's just and it just unfolds organically in
right.
the end.
Yeah,
So
I think
yeah.
that leads to like especially when you're making your final suite of images or your final portfolio presentation, and then you know the image that you choose to put on your cover page,
Mm.
that's something which is really really emphasized because of the like the aesthetic importance of that image, like the fact that that will be like the image which is put on the website and put on your portfolio cover page and what the critics see and when they are looking through your portfolio.
The
So
defining image of your
yeah,
project.
so I feel like that's like an example of how aesthetics matters so much because
Yeah.
like we put so much effort towards making that one that like single image which doesn't really make sense because the point of architecture is to make like different ways of communicating a project, right? Like plan, section, elevation, and also renders and things, but it, most of the time you end up having just like one image to like define your project.
To be, yeah, I do understand that. Okay, first of all, I actually never put my final image on the front page of my project portfolio. I think it was my unit last year, but I never put my final image on the first page.
So you're
It's
keeping it.
yeah, keep it for the end. It's always like a taster image of like what it is. Like it could be like a small
Mm.
drawing kind of thing, and then that would
Mhm.
be like the final thing. But anyways,
But
yeah,
for example, on the website, you as the cover picture, it wouldn't be the taster image, right? Because the website
it still wasn't the final
Is
one.
it? Oh, okay, I
it
didn't know
was it
that.
was my storyboard for the narrative.
Oh, right, okay.
But yeah, I kind of get what you're saying, like especially for us when we're going to apply for jobs or whatever and we want to make a portfolio, right? You're going to put the best image on the front cover to capture people's attention. Like that's just how it
Mm-hmm.
is. And like we're responding to what you say, kind of like that one image being the definition and
Mm-hmm.
defining the entire scope of the
Mm-hmm.
project. I feel like ultimately, like for a visual sub like course or like field like architecture, like the visuals will define the scope of your project. And I have this quote from this random architect that I cannot remember the name of. I kept trying to look it up before this recording and I can't find it. But basically he was saying like if I could basically I think it was like an interviewer asking him like, "Oh, could you like explain your work in like a few
Mm-hmm.
words or blah blah like in brief, like summarize it." And he
Mm-hmm.
was like, "Well, if words could explain it, then I won't need to build it anyways." So I feel like yeah, because the thing is, I think also with having one image and you saying that it's about different processes that define the work, but
Yeah,
ultimately for say like an employer who's looking for like employees or people
right.
who are looking at your work, you know, people's attention span is short,
Yeah,
like super short. So how can you capture their attention in the shortest amount of time and like try to make them interested in learning the project? That's the hero image. Like you have to let that image speak for itself. And I think that's just how it is. Like despite like all of us saying, "Oh
yeah,
yeah, but you know, like it shouldn't be one image just defining the whole scope of the project because I spent like 3 months on it and I did all these plans and sections." But ultimately, like people don't really care if they don't know you. You know, you need to have
yeah,
something that speaks to them and makes them interested in like looking at your project. And in the end, it's really just letting the visual speak for itself and the
yeah,
project, so people would look at it. Yeah.
yeah. I think no matter how much we say that, oh, we should care about whether whether it serves its function, we are still like the architects. We're not like the engineers. So we still have to make it look nice.
Yeah,
I think,
obvious.
at least.
Yeah, I think to some extent, yes.
Okay, I was gonna ask, like, how do you think your sense of aesthetics have changed since you started at uni, or like since, yeah, or like how do you think education has changed how you approach how something looks, or judge how something looks?
I feel like definitely in the beginning, it's very like surface level, kind of like the whole Dong Diamond Plaza trip. It's
I
very.
still think it's such a cool building.
I think it's cool. I mean, we're probably gonna. This is like
This is gonna get so much
controversial,
flack. I think it's
controversial
cool.
in
I don't
architecture
think it's a
school.
good building. I just think it's cool.
Yes, okay. Made our point clear, you know. But yeah, I feel like in the beginning obviously it's very like super like on the level superficial, but I feel like as I went into Bartlett, like you kind of there's other things to appreciate, other things to read into the building. You know, it's not just the visuals kind of thing. I think the thing is the visuals is the first thing you see that
Mm-hmm.
makes you want to learn what's going on behind that whole facade, behind that visual.
Mm-hmm.
But that's gonna be the first thing that captures your attention.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it's just like if it's just a random building on the street,
Mm-hmm.
like no hate to any random building, but it's like what makes you want to learn about that building? It has to
Yeah.
capture your attention in some way, and that's why you have all the critique and kind of things that goes along with like all these kind of modernist buildings. No, not modernist. Sorry, like all these like crazy buildings. That's why you have all these critiques, right? Because it catches people's attention and people want to talk about it, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say now that I went into Bartlett, I just learned more about kind of the things behind it, even with history. You know, like how like this week's trip at Kew Gardens is like when we looked at the pagoda,
Right.
like that's supposed to be Chinese, but it's actually not authentic at all. Like
Right.
you find other ways to like look at things from different
Yeah.
perspectives. It's not just, oh, it's a cool building, and then you like walk away. You know,
Right.
like
Yeah.
there's so much stuff that goes on like behind it that you don't really see it. Because I went to Kew Gardens twice. The first time I went was before I went into architecture school, saw the pagoda. Oh, cool building. Okay, bye. And then this time it was like, yes. So this is when William Chambers realized like they were super into Chinese like building styles, even though it was like inauthentic and like kind of romanticized the whole uh, Asian kind of building style and made
Mm-hmm.
it into this whole pagoda that's not even authentic. So it's just really interesting to see like different viewpoints of like looking at a building, and it's not just like pure aesthetics, but
Mm-hmm.
obviously through like doing design projects by myself, I also realized that it's not just kind of like artsy, like it's
Mm-hmm.
not just trying to be artsy. That was kind of like my, at least that,
Mm,
like being
right.
super honest, that was
Like
my
it's not
first.
about being quirky, right? Or like having strange references
Yeah, I
or
mean,
developing like a visual aesthetic. Anyway,
yeah.
continue.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, to be completely very honest, in the beginning when I looked at Bartlett, I was like, oh, this is just like a very artsy school kind of thing. That
Mm,
was like my first, I think that was my first impression. But then
mm-hmm.
obviously when I'm in the school, there's like so much more to that. I feel like, I mean, yes, they do focus on the like visuals and stuff, but then there's also stuff that goes behind it. I realized how much more important the development of the narrative for the project is, how much more there's context and research just behind like that one pretty image that's like stunning visuals to the outside viewer. Obviously,
Yeah,
as a viewer, that's all you see. But then once you actually did the work, you realize that there's so much stuff just behind that one image, you
yeah,
know? And then now I feel like I can appreciate like those visuals a bit more, and like I will ask like, oh, how did they come to that image? How did they come to that
yeah,
conclusion that this is the best way to present the project? And I feel like that's the most interesting part to me, at least.
yeah. I think for you, like especially for you, you really like the process of how someone gets to somewhere.
Mm-hmm. What about you? Like you, how about you? Like developing your aesthetics and like how you view buildings
I
and
feel like
stuff.
it made it less, yeah, I like what you said, like less mainstream, if that makes sense. And also things like I used to not see like how different a good portfolio looks from a bad portfolio. Like I used to not be able
Oh
to
my
see it.
god, yes.
And I've talked about this before, where it's like I just couldn't see that like the pictures don't line up at the corners, and then the titles are different font size, and it didn't used to bother me. But now, because tutors are just so like anal about
Particular
it,
about it.
it just developed, and I feel like that kind of eye for aesthetics has really developed. So like especially in year two, like the eye for finessing something, like seeing if something, like improving it to the point where it looks really really good, and then
Mm.
even if the improvement is like 10%, it's like 10% better than the last one, and that took like 50% of your effort, it's still worth it. Okay, I feel
Yeah.
like this is me being like a bit bratty, but yeah, I feel like like sometimes it's still worth it if that's your job to make it look nice. And then
Yeah.
I feel like I learned so much through the process of like improving it to that point.
Yeah. I definitely get it. And I think the main thing is just like having practice and how you do it. Like,
Mm.
I swear to God, if you look back at that portfolio video that I uploaded on YouTube, I hate that portfolio so much, like with a burning passion. I hate it so much because when you look back, you know, there's this meme on architecture pages on Instagram that was like, there's this meme of someone washing their eyeballs, and I was like, after looking through my first ever attempt at a design portfolio, that's how I feel. I want to wash my eyeballs, but it's a process, you know. Like no matter how much I don't like it, that was what I did when I was, you know, 16, 17, and that's
Right.
like the best attempt that I could
Right,
do at
yeah.
piecing a portfolio together. So it's nice to kind of see the progress of that turning into what I can do now, and
Mm-hmm.
that just takes practice, you know. Like you said, like piecing the portfolio together and lining up stuff, making the, you know,
Mm-hmm.
the images look like, I feel like for anyone who's not in the course, they're
Mm-hmm.
gonna be like, nobody cares, like it's just a portfolio. But like to
That
me,
is
I
not
feel like
true.
that's not true. That's not true. I feel like like it just, I don't know, like I feel like when it's clean and well presented, it tells you so much about the person who made the
Mm-hmm.
project and also the project itself. But I
Mm-hmm.
think it's because we're in this environment for so long. That's kind of things that like jump out to us that may not necessarily jump out to other people who are not necessarily in this field, you know? But I feel like
Yeah.
it's just portfolio piece like layouts for me at least is like important because it tells the story of the project and like the narrative, how you got to the final image and like how you work as a person. And it's also kind of like what's the best way and best language to showcase the essence of your work. So all of it just takes practice, you know. Like when I look back at my year one portfolio, year two, and like I compare it to what I'm doing now, like you can
Right.
definitely see the development. And then through that process you develop like an eye to see how does it look like pieced nicer together.
Right,
But then
yeah.
it's not just about looking nice, it's about telling the story and the narrative, for
Mm-hmm.
me at least. How do you feel about the portfolio stuff for you? Like you see
I
your development, right?
Yeah, I think the longer that I've been here, the more that I really enjoy putting it together. Like at the end of the week, because you have tutorials in a weekly cycle, I'm just really like putting my portfolio together because I can see everything come together and I see like, oh, this is where I got this reference from and this
Yeah.
reference from and this. But then that only happens when I'm like happy with my project.
Yeah, but but then again, obviously we have good weeks and bad weeks, but I feel like ultimately the portfolio is the tool that tells the story of your project. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I do really like piecing it together, and it's almost like when you finish a project and you look back at what you've done, it's
Mm-hmm.
like yourself frozen in time and you look
Mm-hmm.
back at like how you did it. It's kind of like yeah, how I hated my portfolio back then, but that was like me as a designer and what I could achieve frozen in that specific time
Yeah.
at that portfolio, and you look through your progress.
I think you really like looking at progress in general, like even with like the journaling and the vlogging and the
Yes,
various things that you
I'm just
do.
a sentimental person. Yes.
But I mean, it's good.
Yeah, but that's just me, That's kind of
Yeah.
also the essence of like my P1, like my project 1 this
Yeah.
year. About like because I'm doing it almost like as a diary form for my
Mm-hmm.
drawing. So yeah, it's also collecting in the progress of how I achieved the end. So I guess that also links to our next topic. We can kind of briefly discuss about like P1 because I think you were interested in discussing it.
I think that was just because since you're talking about portfolio and about our experience now, I think what because the project that we're working on now is P1, which is like the pre-building project. So there's
Mm-hmm.
not a lot of designing an actual space or building. So I feel like, especially because I was having a conversation with my mom about what my project was about, and then she was very confused as to why we were even doing P1. And I feel like that's an example of how we develop our like design sensibility without actually designing a building. And especially in P1, like it's more artsy than than P2 because you don't even need to design like doesn't really have any constraints. It can
Mm-hmm.
be sort of anything that you want it to be. So like for example, you are just drawing a very big drawing and I am
Thanks.
making a very short video and
Mm-hmm.
that's our P1 and it has not much like architectural content either. But I
Mm-hmm.
think that's also an example of how we are forced to develop yeah like the our aesthetic sensibility and how we are forced to experiment without the constraints and how sometimes that's actually really useful, especially before it feeds into your building project later on.
Yeah, I feel like project 1 is kind of just a springboard that leads up to project 2, which is the building project. And it's kind of like it gets your creative thinking to work. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like it is still architectural. Like, obviously, we could argue, like, to what extent for each individual project, because everyone's
Mm.
project 1 is different.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like to some extent, it's definitely still architectural, at least for mine.
Mm-hmm.
Like obviously I know it, so I can say that, but I feel like it is architectural, and I think it's mostly about finding a language and that works for you, and also a
Mm-hmm.
way of thinking and a way of working
Mm-hmm.
that works for you, which you could then apply to project 2.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously project 2 has a lot more constraints, and you are doing your tech report with the project 2, whereas
Mm-hmm.
project 1, like you said, is like not as much restraints,
Mm-hmm.
which is good and bad. I mean, I like it so far.
But
So
I think it's
yeah.
also important for, I guess, even in the future, like you need periods of thinking and experimenting, and then you need periods of putting it into actual building. But
Mm.
honestly, I don't know. I really don't know.
I don't know,
Fe-
but I mean, so far I feel like it was a good, at least from my experience in like project, I mean, from my experience in year 2, I did feel like it was a good springboard for the next project that's upcoming. Did you feel the
Mhm.
same way in your year 2?
Yeah, I thought it was a good starting point as well. But in year two, obviously, I was just much more confused. And now I was like, now my year three P1 has a lot more purpose than my year two P1, where I was just like
Do
looking
whatever.
around. Yeah, seeing what you're into, learning skills, like
Mm-hmm.
digital skills.
Yeah. Okay. um I think, like, to kind of conclude and like to summarize what we've said, I feel like is aesthetics important in architecture? You can have your own opinion, but then like for me, I feel like it like aesthetics is important to some degree,
Mhm.
but like without the grounding of a site or context or
Mhm.
functionality, it's just a floating piece of concept or art.
Mhm.
So I think you really do need the visual to like capture the viewer's attention, but like
Mhm.
once you've captured the attention, then the content and everything else will fill in the gaps, and then that creates a cohesive project and makes the
Mhm.
project rich in its own.
Yeah,
What do you think?
I think that it's something which I drive my project towards. Like I think I'm very geared towards how something looks because I like to do like the rendering and the 3D things. And I feel like that's something which is very important to me. So I'm really happy that I'm like growing in this way, I guess. But also
Yeah.
it's hard to design when you just focus on that because I think
Yeah.
what ends up happening with my projects is that it becomes very form driven and then I'm like, yeah, I just wanted a curve. And then they're like, but why? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. So then I have to like think I think like I need to like change my approach to make it more narrative driven a bit.
I feel like it's definitely a balance of two. Like you need to
Mhm.
have the kind of speculative side, but then the side also grounds you, so it's not.
Mhm.
Well, I just repeated what I said, but to be fair, I feel like sometimes the design is intuitive in some way. Like when I do
Mhm.
my drawing for my project one,
Mhm.
yes, it is kind of like some of it is derived from fragments of the site
Mhm.
and kind of the narrative and things I'm looking at. But some of the times when I'm just drawing, things just come intuitively to me, and I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, that's gonna go there. Like that's just I feel like that's all of the design process. Like sometimes you just don't overthink it too much. It just kind of
Mhm.
unfolds itself
Mhm.
organically in the end, anyways. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to ask because back then I don't know if this is still relevant, but then remember back then when you were saying something like the tech part wasn't something you enjoyed the most, but then you
Right.
also said like the course, like maybe like stuff you didn't enjoy in the course, like you were like questioning if you enjoyed the course. I was just wondering like.
Oh, I think it's just like sometimes when I don't know what I'm doing or working towards, like right now I'm in a good position,
Mm.
but when I don't know what I'm working towards, I just don't enjoy it, which is obvious the case. So the point is to like keep going until you find something which like sticks, right?
Because I feel like it's important to like also say things that you don't like about the course instead of just like saying yeah I really like this, I really like this, blah blah blah. You know,
Okay.
I feel like
Maybe the parts I don't like is that I don't like that it was so foreign to me at the start
yeah.
because I just didn't know what you were working towards. I think I didn't like that I didn't know what I was doing, which is also partly the school's fault. Like they didn't set out very clear expectations of what we expected to produce. I feel like sometimes even like even now, like some of the tutors in year two and year three are so much more clear about what I should make next week than year one, which is so weird.
Yeah, I think it's a lot about the transition of things,
Yeah,
especially the transition from a secondary school to uni. Like that transition was very difficult. And even now when I'm mentoring the year ones, like
right,
they don't know what's going on, you know, and I always have to tell them like, you know, it takes time to figure out. But then sometimes like the content of the course makes them a
right.
bit confused.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's just I mean the whole point of like the this podcast is kind of like talk about our opinions and feelings without because we're not advocating the school or anything. We're just kind of talking about our feelings where we just happen to be in the same school and we're just discussing it. So I think it's just nice to kind of talk about like things we like and don't like. And yeah,
Mhm.
like things are telling me like it's the same thing. Like sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm so frustrated. Like this course sucks.
Mm,
But it's only when like you said, like I'm feeling bad, like when I rethink
mm,
everything, it's a good progress. Like I see myself grow as a
mm,
designer and like how I approach things, and
mm,
that's also interesting to see how I grow and develop as a person. You
mhm.
know.
Something else I don't like is that we have to pay so much money to do stuff. I swear this week I spent £100 on like my installation like project, and my future is gonna cost like 400 extra pounds. It's just crazy.
Oh my god, really?
Yeah.
I don't know how much I'm paying yet, so maybe next week I can complain.
It's just so expensive.
Okay. Well, I totally feel you. Like even living in London, like please, the cost of living is just off like crazy
Yeah.
already. So I'm already trying to like save so much money. I mean, I am doing an expense list every week. Like I'm trying to
Yeah.
cut my costs down. But yeah, I feel like I'm already trying my best. Well, go like leaving all the bad days and high costs, would you say like kind of developing as a designer and like learning the kind of the balance between aesthetics and functionality, like you enjoy that part? Kind
Yeah.
yeah?
I think in third year I really enjoy it, but also because I'm getting a lot of positive validation from my tutors, if I'm being honest. Probably
And
like
me.
No, me. Probably because I'm
I
getting a
know.
lot of,
I
so
said
like,
I'm giving you positive validation too. But obviously
yeah.
my opinion doesn't matter as much because I'm not marketing your work.
But like I feel like so much of it is driven by what they think of my project, but I need to like take ownership and stuff. I'll be fine. I do like
Yeah.
it now. I feel like especially after
Okay,
last
that's good.
summer of experimentation in other career paths, this is much
That's
better.
good. Oh, I'm so happy for you. That's really good. But yeah, like the point where you say like taking ownership, it is like a thing. Like I remember some people saying like this is like their tutor's projects and not theirs. Some
Mm,
point I don't remember. It was like a long time ago. But
mm,
um, I think yeah, it's also a balance between saying what you want and listening to their opinions because obviously they have more experience, right? But then
mhm,
sometimes you also want to stick to yourself. It's
mhm,
just finding a balance. There's no right or wrong. You never
mhm,
know what this instance you should say, so it's just
mhm,
mostly about feelings, which just kind of goes with the
mhm.
intuitive and like aesthetics visuals part of the project. So yeah, do you have anything else to add,
I
Vincent?
think just since you're talking about aesthetics,
Yeah.
and then talking about aesthetics, like going back to the Tumblr version, like in real life, I think
Mm.
it's just so important. And I feel like it links to architecture in a way because I feel like sometimes when something is aesthetic, it's also about the whole experience. So like when you see a like a really nice sunset, or like you go to like a really like street where like the walls are like super close and then it's like
Mm.
cobblestones and it's just like this is so nice. And then
So aesthetics.
yeah, it's just like part of it is also like the experience, like how it makes you feel. And I feel like that really links to like really drives me to want to design a space as well, like how experiential it is. But I think that's just like that's the kind of designer that I am.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, everything derives from experience, right? So that kind of influences our design to like a huge extent, unsubconsciously. Sorry, subconsciously. Subconsciously, because it's all derived from experience. And yeah, I agree with you. Like when I see tiny alleyways with like nice walls and windows on the side, I'm like, yeah, that looks so cool. Like I wanna look at it like all like with my time and like appreciate kind of the
Yeah.
small details that goes on in that alleyway. So yeah, I totally relate to that. And it's almost like I feel like we need aesthetics in life to feel happy anyways because like otherwise the world will just be like a dull and boring
Yeah.
place and like very utilitarian,
And it
which
makes you like
some
pay
people like.
attention
Yeah, some
to
people like,
things.
but
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, pay
Like I'm just
attention
like
to
more
the.
present, all this jumbo.
All of our podcast comes to be present, to be present in the moment. But yeah, I feel like otherwise the world will just be dull and boring, and then which might be good in some fields in some areas and applications, but I don't necessarily agree with that in like our context
Yeah.
with like designing and stuff.
Okay.
So yeah, that's how I feel. Like you said, like it's just nice to have those kind of small sparks of aesthetics and then you can appreciate it, and that's kind of like where the joy sparks from. Yes, you need the basis to form like the foundation and stuff, but it's
Mm.
the kind of the small sparks and the
Mhm.
visuals that jump out to you and make you feel like I don't know, happy and like can appreciate them. So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and yeah, we'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Bye.